have asked me how I get crispy skin on the pork belly or a roasted pork, and I learnt this method quite a few years ago, and it seems to always work for me. Firstly, score the skin. Now what I like to use, something that your husband might have in the garage or so on, a craft knife or a Stanley knife. You can set it at a certain depth so that it doesn't cut too deeply into the skin, and then just take it from the one end and right through. And I like to score it reasonably close together so that you get nice thin strips, so it makes it a lot easier to carve. And it's also easier to do this when the meat is still quite cold. If it's warmed up a bit much, you find it's a bit harder to do it. Doesn't matter if they're not exactly straight or exact distances from each other. And then with a big piece like this, I like to score across the other way as well. Just makes it a lot easier to carve it when you've got. So you could then do a diagonal type of scoring or horizontal. Just check, you can just. Right, the next step is to pour, and this sounds crazy, but to pour a whole electric jug full of boiling water over that skin. So I'm just going to move it to the sink and then we'll do that. Pop the piece of pork into the sink, obviously that you've cleaned well and hasn't got any bits of debris and so on. And then the electric jug, which has just come to the boil, just pour it over all the skin. And you can see where the scoring starts to open up. And then you might be able to see some odd bits where perhaps hasn't been scored quite as deeply as I might like. So once I've dried it, I'm just going to check that little bit. And then dry it with the paper towels. And I'm just going to pop it back onto the board and just check the bits that I perhaps have missed. You can see some there that perhaps not as deep as I'd like. So this thing now is to, if you're going to use any seasonings or spice mix, is to turn your meat over and rub it into the flesh. Don't put it onto the skin side. And then that needs to go in the fridge uncovered like this for, well, up to 8 hours or overnight if you can do that. Because what you want to get a crispy skin is to have this as dry as you can. So about 4 hours before you want to serve your pork, you need to remove it from the fridge so it comes up to room temperature. And then about 3 hours before you want to serve, you need to preheat your oven to 200 degrees, and then place the pork on a rack, you can see here, over a roasting dish with water underneath. Now that water helps to keep the meat nice and moist while it's cooking, and also stops the fat that comes from the skin splashing and making a smoky mess inside your oven. So my oven's almost up to temperature. I'm going to place it in that oven at 200 degrees for 15 minutes. So here's my pork just out of the oven. It's had the 15 minutes at 200, then the 2 hours at 180, and then finally about 15 or maybe 20 minutes at 230. And you can see it's pretty crispy and crunchy. I'm just going to leave it to rest now for a while, and then I'm going to carve it up. But yeah, it's worked pretty well. A bit of water still underneath. I've had to top that up a couple of times, but it stopped it splattering quite as much as it could. There's probably the odd little place where it's not as crispy as it could be, and you can see why, because it's in a hollow. It's stuck down, concave. What I do sometimes, if that's happening quite a bit to a large area, I tuck something underneath to prop it up so that it makes a more of a convex surface, and then it seems to crisp it up much better. But it's still going to be delicious. Good luck with yours.